So I just wrapped up my first time playing Path of Exile 2 at the Exile meetup in Los Angeles. And I gotta say, there's a lot to be excited about. And I can go on about the adventure and talk about like my journey getting there and all the crazy stuff that happened. But I wanted to talk about the 7 things that I absolutely loved about this game in its current state, and I want to share this with you. So the first thing that I really enjoyed was the iteration of their combat role. So in Path of Exile 2, every character gets a combat roll, a dodge roll as it were. Now, essentially, this provides a few frames of invulnerability where you can dodge basically all attacks. If you time it right, you can dodge most abilities and walk out scot-free. Now, it doesn't necessarily transport you further or cover any more distance than if you just walked, and it's still the same speed despite there being a lot of action happening. But it's meant to be a strategic roll in and out or away from harm that is afforded to every class across the board. What's really cool to note, specifically talking about the dodge roll, is that it is animation canceling. So for example, the warrior that I played during the beta, if he's using his rolling smash, I can dodge roll mid rolling smash if I know that 1, I'm not going to be able to get the damage off, or 2, I'm going to take a ton of damage and I need to stop what I'm doing to dodge out of the way. What's interesting about it is that if you time it correctly, you can get the damage off and immediately finish that casting animation and then roll out of harm's way for any type of retaliatory attack. That's really, really cool, especially for those who have quick reflexes. It was confirmed that there are certain abilities that you will not be able to essentially animation cancel and dodge roll out of. So once you have committed to casting whatever that ability may be, then it will be essentially you're stuck. You're going to finish the cast and then do everything else. Now, the warrior didn't really have any crazy things going for it that locked it into that animation. Every time that I needed to, I could dodge roll out, canceling what I'm doing. So that was pretty neat. But the idea of adding that extra layer of defense and almost like strategic gameplay, moment-to-moment gameplay, that's so cool. So I went ahead and talked about this in another video that I've recently done, and I absolutely love the change that they've made for the shield. Now, the shield is going to be able to be a blocking attack. In the playtest, we were able to see the warrior use a shield, block attacks that were forward facing. Now, granted, they can't block all of the attacks all the time because there is an endurance bar, and once you take so many hits, your shield block is basically done. But the idea of it is that you can strategically weave in an attack, block the retaliation, and go from there. And what's cool is that it not only blocks melee attacks or ranged attacks, it blocks spells too. Forward-facing immunity. Now, again, it also doesn't really do anything, it seems like, for ground attacks or aerial attacks or smashes that hit a large section. So putting up your shield for those isn't really going to do that much of a service. But it's interesting to see all the other different interactions that you can potentially put into the game, specifically using the shield. I like the idea of a shield block. I loved it in Path of Exile. I mean, my Templar was a Reckoning Templar shield block build, and I thought that that was really, really cool. I like this iteration that you have essentially a shield wall that provides the defenses that you could need while giving you some type of extra, we'll say, choice instead of just always dodge rolling. I liked it. I thought that that was a really cool addition to the game. I'm on board for it. And even with the idea of the shield block being able to block all those attacks, boss attacks that have a red flash as they are going through their animation show that that particular attack cannot be blocked. So there's no point in you standing there and eating it with a shield because you're still just going to take the damage anyway. So in that sense, it offers that versatility and that quick decision making. Okay, I need to dodge roll out of the way, or I just need to move out of the way. But you're not just going to sit there and eat the attack and be like, oh, well, what happened? I had my shield. There was a sign. Now, I would be interested to see how many other classes can actually use a shield and to what degree of effectiveness. Now, I'd imagine, for example, the warrior would be able to block attacks for, like 5, 6, 7, 8 attacks. But say, for example, the sorceress uses a small circular shield that is meant to be just for a 1 or 2 hit defense. That perhaps could be a capability or some way that they show that the warrior is a little bit more, melee oriented, defensive capable compared to the squishier but more offensively powered sorceress. I'd be interested to see the dynamic if that changes. The third thing that I really enjoyed from the Path of Exile playtest was seeing the way that they're trying to implement combos. Now, from my background, which was in Guild Wars 2, combos were a very important thing. It was something that popped up frequently. And what they're trying to do here in Path of Exile 2 is to offer different ways that you can chain your abilities together to make them more powerful. Say, for example, they use the sorceress's flame wall. If you shoot sparks through the flame wall, the sparks deal electric as well as fire damage, and that's a really cool interaction. Now, for the warrior, we didn't really have too many, we'll say, comboing capabilities, at least not that I saw. The big one that I was able to see is that we had an ability, a melee attack that chunked armor, and it removed armor after so many hits. And if you use an ability called Sunder, it essentially deals double damage to fully armor-broken enemies. So it's kind of like, I felt like that was more of a single target boss fight mechanic type thing. But that was just a really cool interaction that I saw with the warrior. But there's a number of different combos. And I really think this is important because it's starting to implement, or at least look like they're trying to implement, that cool co-op gameplay. We don't really see that with Path of Exile. You don't really see that many grouped players. It's usually solo, and you go on your own. You're on your own adventure. It seems like they're really trying to focus on that community feel where I'm getting a group of my friends together and we are talking about our builds, putting the builds together so that they make sense so that we can handle whatever the heck we're about to go do. I like the path that they're going with this because group play and then combos, that feels really satisfying. One small thing that I was curious at first to see if I would like it, but I did actually in implementation enjoy it, is the way that they have reworked their skill choices or their skill gems. Essentially, as you were going through the story, you are given an uncut gem, and you can choose what specific ability that you want from that particular choice or that tier. Now, as you go higher into the tiers, you get more damaging abilities, heavier hitting abilities, we'll say cooler things. But you can pick your specific builds as you were going through in your skills and choose which ones you want to implement with your particular build. As compared to like Path of Exile, where it's kind of like either a random drop or if you're lucky and that's a skill gem that you can use on your character. I like the way that they're implementing it here in Path of Exile 2, where you have that player choice, which is very important when you're developing your build. It's great. That's what you want to see. The fifth thing that I absolutely loved from the playtest is the boss fights. So I'm a big sucker for really good music for a boss fight, and then just an overall sense of dread seeing whatever the big baddie is that we have to deal with. Now, one of the things that Path of Exile 2 has done very well has made the boss fights feel as if they are dramatic, that it is a challenge to bring down. Now, granted, out of the three classes, apparently the warrior was the most difficult one to play with and figure out. It was the only melee option that we had during this playtest. You could either be the warrior, the sorceress, or the ranger. The warrior was almost, you had to treat it in a sense as an Elden Ring boss, where you have to dodge these multiple hit combos, get your melee attack in, maybe one or two, and then fade out and dodge some more. And I liked actually that kind of gameplay because in ARPGs, yes, it's great to smash through packs of mobs and stuff like that and just blow up whole screen worth of enemies. But having a boss that has a bunch of different mechanics, a bunch of challenging mechanics that you really have to time everything through, I loved it. That was so cool to see. And what's even better is that they essentially give you a checkpoint right before you go into any of your boss rooms. So as you were going to attempt this boss, you don't have to worry about like a crazy long walk back to go and fight this boss. No, you can spawn right there and then go again. The idea is that you should like almost die 2 or 3 times as you were fighting this boss to figure it out and say, oh, okay, I need to dodge that. I need to roll first, get my attacks in, fade out, run away, come back in, land a couple of attacks, and learn from there. That's a beautiful thing, especially as they start progressing with the boss fights, moving throughout the rest of the acts. I'm excited. Now, the sixth thing that I actually really enjoyed, and I didn't think I was going to enjoy it. I actually was a little I was hesitant to actually try it, but for the sake of trying something new that they're trying to implement in the game, I gave it a shot. And that is the WASD control scheme. Now, I'm used to my traditional point and click and moving around and going through there, but using my left hand to essentially guide where my character is, having my right hand point to where my character is going to be and what abilities I'm using, and then comboing it with the different buttons that I'm already there, actually felt very fluid. It made the gameplay a lot more seamless, and I didn't think I was going to enjoy it. I really didn't think that I was going to enjoy the WASD controllers, but it was actually very, very effective. So I will give credit for that. That was something that I was kind of surprised with. Now, with those controls, one thing that I did realize, and this is, it would have happened if I even just used my mouse for point and click, is that occasionally when I was moving through mobs or moving around mobs, I would get almost, in that sense, stuck. I couldn't phase through them. So there's no phasing in there. You can get effectively body blocked if you're not careful. So that's something that you have to keep in mind, and especially when you're planning your dodge rolls and your abilities, you can't dodge roll if you're surrounded by enemies. So keeping that in that mindset of either sticking and moving, using your movement abilities, a teleport, what have you, and the controllers, the WASD controllers, make that a lot easy so you don't accidentally click on a mob and have you turn around and fight, and then that's what gets you surrounded. You can essentially keep fluidly moving away from everything, still swinging 360 degrees wherever you need to without any hesitation. It was perfect. Well done. And last thing that I was expecting, I wouldn't expect anything less, and I knew I was going to love it once I actually got into it. In my opinion, the very best thing about Path of Exile 2's gameplay is, without a doubt, satisfying combat. Without a doubt, satisfying combat in this game, it is unmatched. Between the combos, between the setups, between the individual bosses and creatures, the creatures not only just having, like, you know, I shoot a bow. Like, no, they shoot a bow and then they do a charged attack if you're not paying attention, and they will blast you if you're not careful. That's so cool to see because it shows a level of design. And this is Act 1, by the way. Right, I only got, like, I would guess, venture a guess, like 75% of the way through Act 1 in that time that I played for this entire demo. That's how big this game is. And then you have, like, the first tier mobs having multiple high damaging abilities and animations that you have to pay attention to. Like, the combat in this game is revolutionary, and that's the best way I can put it. I thoroughly enjoyed roughing it out as the warrior, landing a shockwave, landing an earthquake, and then following it up with a rolling smash, just a 1-2 combo, and dealing a ton of damage. I absolutely loved it. I felt like that was exactly what an ARPG is supposed to be. It's supposed to be that kind of, like, almost gritty, big hitting, you know, like slugfest, and I loved it. I absolutely loved what this game brought with its combat. Well done, well done. Now, again, I will say that this game is still very early on, and everything that I say here could essentially be changed by the time the final product comes out, of course. But I will say, in its current state right now, this game is pretty damn good. It is a pretty damn good ARPG that's still well into development. So I'm just excited to see where the game will go. I'm excited to see where it will grow. And I'm excited to see what Grinding Gear really has to throw out there, because they have been knocking it out of the park with this game. Not gonna lie. Now, if you didn't see my last video where I went ahead and talked about my just general overview and my own thoughts of the game, you can click that video here and get a better idea of what it's like playing Path of Exile 2. Aside from that, stay caffeinated, Exiles.